Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. So let's go to the chase. I think the first question, probably, Larry. So Reactive, how do you react to the supply chain? So, what is in the last, in the last year, what is the most expensive reaction decision or react decision that you have had to take to addressing your supply chain?
Yeah, well, this is a painful one. So I'll go back a couple of years just because this is really what kind of the catalyst behind our transformation journey on the supply chain side. So something somewhat unique about our products and our supply chain is Jack Daniel's is a Tennessee whiskey, and you can only make Tennessee whiskey in one place, right? So largest whiskey brand in the world, we ship it to more than 160 countries from that one location. And so you can imagine the impact on, when there's supply chain disruption, the challenges coming out of COVID, and the reactive decisions we had to take to make sure we had product in market due to those disruptions and not having visibility where product was at or good predictability is we were air freighting product all around the world. And so over about an 18-month period, we spent an incremental cost of nearly $200 million.
Wow, that's a lot of money. What about for you?
We're a direct store delivery distributor of Coca-Cola products and other brands as well. I think about the small dollars that occur over thousands of people every day that we can't capture. The latent inefficiencies of our merchandisers, of our delivery teams, of the folks taking orders. And we have so many people in our these are frontline folks. 80% of our workforce is frontline. And the inefficiencies we introduce through the tools and technologies they have is really where I sit. And you'll see it when you go to O'Hare Airport, how many inefficiencies occur, right? You walk up to the gate, the plane's not there, they don't tell you. Of course they know it, but they don't tell you. Every day. It's the little things I think add up to massive costs and we can't capture.
Both organizations have been built over the years as a reactive organization, right? You try to deliver on time, you want to service the customers. How do you pivot an organization that is reactive to more proactive? What's your take on that?
So it's a really fabulous question because you were built a certain way. Your DNA is wired a certain way of how you operate. And it's embedded in who's in charge and been promoted through this enterprise and how they think. And at some point, you got to challenge yourself and your own group to disrupt your thinking and to look at technologies that will be, in the future, enable you to have the information to come together to be more predictive. But that takes your stakeholders having the appetite to disrupt what they do and the stamina to implement it and then driving that change within your organization. But if we're 120 some odd years old, right? So we've got some habits. And the question is, how do we disrupt our own habits to be more efficient in the future?
Larry, what about you?
Yeah, I think very similar story. So we're a 155-year-old company. We have great culture, and what we've done for a long time works really well. I think the advantage we had coming out of misfortune was those supply chain disruptions, the significant cost to the business really gave us that platform to drive change and ask the organization to change. And we really took that step back and focused on process and people first before investing in technology. And then we had leadership buy-in from the top down to drive that accountability. So we've really stayed focused. And I like the word Brett used, stamina. It takes stamina. You have to be resilient. You have to keep pushing. You have to power through the challenges and the resistance to change. So, but really just having that clear directive from the top down and across the organization.
Okay. I assume that a lot of what you do, you try to get, reflect on the data, and that data transform it into information, and with that gain some insight that then you can translate into action. So on that token, what specific insights have transformed your operations? And let's start first time with you, Larry.
Yeah, I'll use a couple of examples to where increased visibility, having access to that data, being able to better predict when we get product to market. One of our more challenging markets and one of our fastest growing markets is Brazil, but a very complex market from customs to we have to have tax paid via script stamps, which have to be applied in market. And that can create a very extended supply chain from order to delivery. It had grown at one point to as much as 85 days. We did, and then you have potential port strikes and slowdowns in customs and things of that nature. And so for us, being able to better understand, predict that, and see it coming helps us manage our production planning, raw materials, buying strip stance ahead of time. That's a big change that we were able to make because we could see how that order to delivery is growing and how we have to make adjustments and be proactive versus, again, we air freighted some product to Brazil for these same reasons, and we've avoided that now.
So on any given day, we can have a couple thousand merchandisers out in the trade. And they're supposed to go to a set group of accounts. But how do you know if they did? And so having the information of a set route and how adherent each individual is to the route, and on any given day you can track one route, like a supervisor can, but you can't scale that. And the newer technologies allow that to just be scaled. Like you don't have to wonder that. It can come back to you and say, hey, Johnny's 3 stops behind, he got stuck at this account, something went wrong. Someone else may need to, in a dynamic sense, help them finish their route, their merchandising route. And you would never know that. And in our future state, we will. And much like we saw on the main stage with agents will come tap us on the shoulder to say, hey, these 4 or 5 folks need help, or this guy never does what he's supposed to. And it'll help us with performance management. It'll help us get better. It'll help us make sure our store shelves look the way they're supposed to. It'll just make us more effective and efficient.
So at the end is being able to gobble up that information and gain the visibility so you can just track it better. So how do you justify the ROI? Because that's always a challenge for people, and the 3 of us, we've been in those shoes trying to justify what could be cost avoidance rather than something else. So how do you justify it? What's the ROI?
Yeah, I think this was a little easier for us than most, given the challenges that we were going through at the time. And the analogy I like to use is for many, many years, we were focused on near perfect service, right? Our products, we have high margin, they're not subject to spoilage. So I kind of equate it to, everything's great, you're floating down the lazy river, supply chain disruptions happen, the water lowers, and all of a sudden you're whitewater rafting, right? And all the costs, lost revenue, and the things that come with that. And so that really set us on the journey that said, we have to transform our supply chain, we have to have new capability, we have to have visibility to data. And we could show that directly by looking at the number of incidents that our customer service team, for example, we grew to a point at the height of this where they were probably spending, I jokingly say, half their time answering angry phone calls from customers and stakeholders about where's the product and when can I expect it and am I going to be able to support my promotion, things of that nature. And so we're able to look on it on a number of fronts, and so we've started measuring efficiency, right? So in terms of from a number of transactions, number of service calls, how many people do we need to operate the business, and how can we scale that disproportionately through added efficiency with that.
So labor
Yep.
savings.
Yeah, number of fronts. So that's the harder one. Those soft costs are a little tougher. So having good metrics in place in terms of how you're allocating headcount and how you grow the business with that same headcount. And then the harder costs are just looking at your track record of incidents and disruptions and service levels. So.
Okay. What about you, your perspective? Is because one of the hard costs are the easy ones, right? What other approach have you used to justify some of this investment?
You can look at the continuity of your operations, the stability of your operations. The more stable your supply chain, the more stable your manufacturing and your direct costs, fewer changeovers, fewer issues. Those can be tracked. It can be a challenge when you attribute that to a tool, right? And on any given day, we're all in a position where someone will say this tool is the reason why, and then someone may say, take it out, it's not the reason why. And I think those will always be challenges based on the next leader that comes into a seat. They may not have the same vision that the prior leader did. And I think we've all seen it. You get a new boss and immediately they would tell you to stop working on some of the prior initiatives as a new administration comes in. So you have to have a coalition of folks that agree that here's the value that's added. I think if you struggle to articulate that, then you set any tool or initiative up to be replaced by another one.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is just that buildup of resiliency has a cost associated. It makes your supply chain more resilient for future interruptions. One that you didn't mention, neither you, but I think we'll be remiss if we don't add it up, is the potential optimization in inventory, right? It doesn't reflect on the P&L, it reflects on the balance sheet, but it's also, if you're speaking to the CFO trying to justify the investment, it's always a good one to add as a justification.
To add to that, in the IT sense, in the technology sense, so many of the initiatives that technology will implement do not reduce a cost in technology. And so the benefits can be spread through various business units, and they have to acknowledge those benefits. Otherwise, we know what the cost is of any tool, 4Kites or you name it. The challenge is the business willing to agree that they're achieving those benefits and operate more efficiently?
So IT needs a larger capital to be able to invest in tools, but then the business need to reflect it in their costs, whether it's on direct costs or in labor or in inventory. Yeah, I agree with you. So maybe an instance that comes to mind where you detected an early warning signal in your system that then allowed you to prevent a disruption. Which are the things that you look at as leading indicators, early warnings to prevent disruptions?
Yeah, probably a recent one is the potential, or there was a short strike at the U.S. ports, right? Which for us, moving all of our product around the world, it's about 65% of our business. That can be a substantial disruption, lead to out of stocks in market, and so on. So I think us having much better visibility and understanding how those port strikes could slow down the move of product helped us make better decisions in terms of how we might redirect product, how we might reposition product, how we should adjust our production scheduling to support those changes. So I think having that well ahead of time, being more predictive, really helps in terms of avoiding those disruptions.
Excellent. Brett, maybe a different one for you. One of the biggest challenges on implementing tools like 4Kites is the change management internally, right? Because at the end, it's people, you're impacting their day-to-day activities. So talk to me about the change management side of it. How do you drive that? How do you excite people about the new tomorrow?
Well, you have to lead people at a pace that they can comfortably change, right? They can only digest so much change at a time. And so you have to be thoughtful and not having a velocity of change that just can exceed what they can absorb and do. But at the same time, the rules have to be rewritten and folks have to be accountable to new procedures. And so the policies and procedures have to be built out and the accountabilities there so that folks are, have you looked in 4Kites before you asked a carrier, right? It's the old famous, or you still pick up the phone. You can't, so we start telling folks you can't use the phone. You have to do this, or if you don't enforce it from a leadership standpoint, you're going to go back. You're just going to drift back to where you were.
Yeah, I agree completely with it, that it is a challenge to get people to change their ways. And I do think that leadership engagement and insisting on, if you know the answers in 4Kites, like for instance, we're constantly looking at how we can manage our global inventories, basically. And in transit at any point in time, we might have 20 to 30 days worth of inventory on boats all around the world. And people, when we're going through the inventory reports, you'll find people going back to their spreadsheet, right? And it's like, I said, I know the inventory's in 4Kites. I'm not going to hear it until you show it to me in 4Kites, right? So I think it's just continuing to push that and hold people accountable is critical. And it's a work in progress, right? There continues to be resistance. People like to do what they're comfortable with or revert back to what's worked for them in the past, but it's just that resilience and just stamina to keep pushing.
What advice you give to the audience, just as you both have a lot of scars from war, and so as leaders, some of them are just beginning their proactive transformation journey. So what advice you give to the audience? So, Brent?
So, I spent 25 plus years in supply chain before moving over to technology. And supply chain's exhilarating, right? It's a different piece every day. Something's always going to go wrong. You get to learn so much and work with great people. I would say something to think about, and it'll piggyback off your last question. With BI is do we continue to create process that is still human-centric? So BI is completely human-centric. I want a report, which means I'm going to look at the report, then I'm going to get my insights and take action. That is not how 20-year-olds think, because they're in chat, they're in Grok, they're using all these tools today, where the answer and the outcome they should take is given to them. That's what old people do. They want reports, add this field, right? Email that to me in a PDF. That's what, people ask me, what do you think is the biggest impedance to AI adoption? I'm like, old people like me. And my mom, right?
Like I know from that one.
My kids don't have that issue. And I think if we keep trying to build like a faster mechanical horse versus building the car, as Henry Ford talked about, that's what AI can do. But BI is still analog. And when we build our processes, if the processes still require a human in the middle of them by design, then I think we have to question that. So I would say try to build them more digitally enabled or digitally native as we move forward.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think the part I would add is when you undertake any journey like this, and this is not unique to any one company, I see it fairly pervasive, is really understanding your data quality and your data governance, right? Because you can have the best tools out there, but at the end of the day, garbage in, garbage out. And so really having that discipline and making the investment, because you don't get that quick return there. But if you do it, and then you bring in the right technology, it can be a big win. Otherwise, if you don't have that right, the technology or tool is always the easy scapegoat, right? And that managing through that change can be very difficult as well. So I'd say data.